Francisco Standard membership. Hi, Tim. How's it going?
Hey, not too bad, David. How you doing? We are gearing up for a short week. We are in the middle of the week already, basically.
Unlike Kyle Shanahan, we're not sleeping on the couch in the office, but I think that both Shanahan and McVay are doing that this week. That's a tradition, right? You have the Sunday game, and then you've got to be back out there Thursday. So, especially these coaches who just grind, and you know that Shanahan and McVay, they're good friends, but good friends want to beat each other. You know that neither of these two guys is taking any time off if he doesn't have to. There's no drag time this week for Shanahan and McVay. Should be a good one on Thursday.
Yeah, I was thinking of all these games remaining. If we're looking at the final five, counting last Sunday's game against the Bears, the one I thought that Shanahan and McVay would both really want to win, even if their playoff odds aren't great and the Rams are slightly better than the 49ers, would be this one. Short week, but you still prepare for it. You don't blow this one off. I'm not saying anybody's blowing off games, but if you want everybody to be at 100% for, if you possibly can, it's this one. Shanahan loves beating the Rams, and that McVay has hated losing to the 49ers, except for in one very important game. But it's just these guys like beating each other because they're friends, they're frenemies, whatever. Obviously, there's some interesting parallels between both teams, but this is one that I think the 49ers are going to want to get up for, even on the quick week. They're at home, so it's not as tough on them as it is for the Rams who have to travel on a short week. Obviously, not a long travel, but after that Bears game, where David, I think you and I both agree was the 49ers' best game, most complete game. Let's see if they got a little momentum. Let's see if they obviously want to vibe. They felt they had to kind of recalibrate going into this Chicago game after two miserable road losses. And Shanahan clearly counts that Seattle home loss, which was a bigger loss, right? It was a bigger for the standings. So Shanahan counted that one, like the 3-game misery they were in. They kind of had a reset, right? You and I both wrote about it. My apologies to David. I kind of meandered over into his piece too, but it was such a big deal. The young veterans stepping forward, Deebo Lenore and Brock Purdy. They want to keep this going. Like, let's see if this team has this energy. I don't know if they're going to win the game. Let's see if they play well. They just got to keep playing well. I think they probably will. I think kind of the bad vibes, the bad mojo probably is over. I don't know if they have enough talent because we know we can go into it. Now they have another running back injured, but I think they're going to play hard. David, you think so?
I think so because we heard it from Yetur Gross Matos. He was mic'd up, and then John Lynch was asked about it on KMBR this morning. Yetur was saying, "Yeah, that's our first playoff win. That's our first playoff win." And John confirmed on the radio that the message in the building was, "We're in the playoffs now." Like they have just said, the rest of the regular season, regardless of what happens, this is the postseason. And they brought that mentality. They brought that sense of urgency. I think that was behind the unusual speeches that we wrote about from Deebo Lenore and Brock Purdy. So I think that urgency is going to stay there. The one problem for the 49ers is that the Rams showed a similar type of urgency on Sunday, and they beat the Bills at home 44-42. And the parallels, Tim, are, I think, setting up for an awesome game. Both Shanahan and McVay had appeared dead in the water earlier this year. Their offenses were languishing. It just didn't seem like a typical Shanahan McVay year. The entire coaching tree, really, the entire Shanahan coaching tree, when you looked at all the play caller ratings and just overall offensive production of those teams, was down. And it seemed, okay, well, maybe they're going to need an offseason to recalibrate. It makes sense. The league works in ebbs and flows. But last week, both Shanahan against the Bears defense that was actually ranked number 5 against the pass, and then obviously McVay against a really good Buffalo team, exploded. And a lot of credit to their quarterbacks. I mean, Stafford and Purdy were really good too, but all of those guys now are going to meet on the field Thursday, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Puka Nacua, great receiver, has hurt the 49ers. Well, Cooper Kupp has too, but more recently, Nacua has been very tough on everybody, including the 49ers. Kind of tough mind. He's kind of their McCaffrey, right? Just get the ball in his hands and let him go. I will say, hearing all this playoff talk, well, we know the 49ers always go 2-1 in the playoffs, right? Every year they're in the playoffs, they go 2-1, which is a great record. So now they're 1-0 in their pseudo playoffs. Maybe they'll go 2-1 or 1-1 or whatever. We'll see in this game. Matt Stafford is tough. That's the guy who beat the 49ers. Other than the 49ers beating themselves in that game down in LA, Stafford just threw some balls they could not defend. and he's done that before. They haven't been dominated by him. They got beat in that NFC Championship game, which I referred to earlier. But like he's just got an arm that where you can do things mostly right, and then he's just going to wait it out and be able to hit somebody off target, off schedule a little bit. Things aren't working out perfectly, and he just throws that ball to Nakua, Cup. They got some other guys. Let's see how the 49ers defense holds up. I think I'm looking at that more than anything because I don't know what the offense is going to be like without any of their top three running backs. I guess Patrick Taylor Jr. Maybe he'll come out, like just put another running back out there and he'll get you 80 yards. I don't know, but I want to see the 49ers defense. I don't think Bosa is going to play. We'll see who else is out there. But I just thought putting Hufanga back in for
Huge,
Jair
huge.
Brown and not for Mustafa, which is interesting decision. Jair Brown has one more year on Mustafa, but I understood why you did it because I think Mustafa is playing better and has a higher ceiling to his
Yeah.
game. But man, that made them look good, right? I mean, they just were tight. They weren't that kind of wild gesturing, and I know sometimes you just do that anyway before the snap. But they didn't have. They kind of were lined up nicely. They were playing clean. And I think Hufanga on the back end was really important. So you have Warner and Hufanga together kind of leading the way on that defense. We'll see if Greenlaw's back. I would kind of doubt maybe for this one, probably next one. But I just think they look tighter again against a Bears offense that was horrible on Sunday. But they made them look horrible too.
Well, it was the most dominant half statistically that we'd ever seen from the Shanahan 49ers. It was the yardage at halftime was 320-4.
Yep.
So that's staggering. But the Hufanga thing, I couldn't agree more. There had been, I think, unfairly, this notion that Hufanga's all pro designation should come with an asterisk. And he put up an awesome year in 2022. Like he was really, really good. Tore his ACL in 2023. And I get it when in the very small glimpse that we had seen him prior to Sunday in 2024. I don't think he was fully back and fully confident on the knee yet. Then he tore his wrist ligament. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who's earned all pro status in the NFL. And that it doesn't come for free. I mean, you got to be doing something right. And I think one of the things that people don't talk a lot about any player because it's not obvious is the communication. And from that
Yep.
safety position, everything's unfolding in front of you. So you're in a unique spot. Nick Bosa's not in the same spot because he's down in the 3-point stance and everything's behind him. But at safety, you look in front of you and you could make sure that you're barking out the signals or delivering the hand signals that put guys in the right spot. And the big problem with Jair Brown, I think, had been angles and missed tackles because of some poor angles. And that's just so hard to master at NFL speed from that safety position. That's something that Hufanga had mastered before. And I think that he was the difference in ensuring that the 49ers were well aligned. I mean, their run defense was the worst in the league over the prior 2 weeks against the Packers and then the Bills. I get that it hasn't been good at all over the whole season, maybe even back to 2023. But if you look at the splits in 2023, Tim, the run defense actually really tumbled after Hufanga's torn ACL. And the fact that they came back and actually were in the correct alignments and only missed 4 tackles, he seems to be the variable that's changed. He's the variable that's back now. So
He's a
I do think
dynamic
you've
player.
got to give him some credit.
Yeah, dynamic player. We talk about Greenlaw all the time. Incredibly dynamic player, incredible big part of that defense the last few years. But it was without Greenlaw and Hufanga for most of that time. I think maybe I didn't talk about that enough. Maybe I didn't think about that enough. Just those two guys flying at the ball in the right way, not recklessly. And that makes a difference. And I think that's going to be an interesting way to discuss Nick Sorensen's year. Because what I'm getting back is a little bit of 49ers saying, hey, he hasn't had everybody. You can't evaluate just the numbers when Bosa's been out recently and Hargrave's been out for most of the year and Fred Warner's been on a fractured ankle and there's been no Greenlaw. And I get it. I mean, you still fired Steve Wilkes after they got to the Super Bowl last year. So all things are up for grabs. And this has not looked like a tied together defense for most of the season. The stats would tell you that. But when you put Hufanga back in and they play like that, and we'll see what happens against Stafford and Nakua and Cup and all those guys. But it makes me think, okay, maybe this is what the conversation is going to be. When he gets some guys back, then maybe Bosa at the end of the year, who knows? What does the defense look like? And it isn't a slam dunk. And I never thought it was a slam dunk that they're going to move on from Sorensen. I don't think Shanahan wants to go another one and done, another defensive coordinator search, unless there's somebody clearly obvious. And we know Jeff Ulbrich is somebody he's been interested in the past. I think it's up for grabs, and it's being played out in front of us. We can make some decisions based on what we see from the defense now that they're getting some guys back. And this is without Nick Bosa. But you see Leonard Floyd getting a couple of sacks. You see Yetur Moss-Grotos. Some of those were like free sacks because Caleb was just kind of running right into them. But I think it's fair to say Sorensen, hasn't had all the weapons, in his pocket that other guys have had. Let's see how it plays out over the season.
I think it all comes down to the run defense performance. In 2018, when a lot of people were saying they're going to fire Saleh, it was a bad defense. They were near the bottom of the league, but it was talent deficient. And one thing that really stood out to me is that efficiency against the run defensively, they ranked number 11 in that 2018 season, which told me, okay, they don't have the horses, but they're structurally sound against the run. A lot of run defense is discipline and effort, right, in the NFL, because every single guy that's out there is physically capable of being out there. This is the highest, most competitive league in the world. But when the run defense, and I think this is the big reason why Steve Wilks was gone after last season, they were number 26 against the run, and you saw it was a disaster against the Lions in the NFC Championship game. They patched it together a bit in the Super Bowl, but I think that decision had already been made going into the Super Bowl. If the defense continues to languish against the run this year, or continues to languish the way it had in Green Bay and in Buffalo after Nick Bosa went out against Seattle, then I could see the 49ers just scrapping everything defensively. But I do believe, I agree with you, I think that they believe with a couple additions, and we saw one of them in Talanoa Hufanga, they think they can structurally get back to playing respectable run defense, and that allows the rest of the defense, even if it's not overpowering without some of these other pieces, allows the rest of the defense to be respectable. And then they feel they have something to build on.
It fits kind of, I think, the way Shanahan is thinking. Again, doesn't mean that if there's a much better candidate out there, he doesn't make that move, but that he kind of wants Sorensen to be right because he fits the culture. The players like him. Maybe there might be some shrugs over the way they've played schematically, but I think mostly they believe in him. They believe in him because they believe themselves, and he's part of them. And Shanahan would like to reinforce that, would like to have that continue. We'll see. I'll say this, I don't think it's going to be Brandon Staley. That's like, they brought him in kind of as a backup DC this season, kind of new ideas. And I just don't think, I have not heard a single thing that, Brandon Staley, that's the guy. That's the smart guy. I have not heard that in there. I don't think it'll be Brandon Staley. I think if they go to a new defensive coordinator, it will be like some of the names we've heard. It'll be Jeff Ulbrich. There'll be people from that system. I don't think it's going to be, Robert Saleh, we know, is available. That sort of DC candidate opposed to Brandon Staley.
And I think Staley is working more specifically with individual players at the DB positions, at cornerback. And I don't think the work there has been bad at all. Charvarius Ward is dealing with, unimaginable tragedy. So he's having a down year. We're not going to sit here picking on him, but Deamara Lenore has been really good. And he credits Brandon Staley because Brandon Staley coached Jalen Ramsey in 2020 when Ramsey was doing what Lenore is now, playing outside and inside, moving back and forth. So I think people, looking at Staley, yes, he does help Sorensen with some of these game plans, but I think his day-to-day work at practice is on a more let's coach these players individually basis. And we saw it in training camp. He was always standing by the corners on the field, and he was giving the corners some hands-on instruction. And I think Isaac Yiadom has gotten better over the course of this season. Renardo Green, a rookie, that I think that's been one of the success stories for the 49ers.
Absolutely.
So just because Staley has this head coaching experience, I think you're right. Kyle Shanahan, it's not necessarily, this guy's actually running the defense, and the second that Nick Sorensen struggles, Shanahan wants to go to Staley. I think that there's other potential uses on the coaching staff, and we've seen some of those. Anyway, those of you who have questions, please do put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them over the course of this show. There's a lot to talk about, obviously. 49ers against the Rams on Thursday, and then if San Francisco wins, the scoreboard watching will be intense over the weekend because the Seattle Seahawks, who are 2 games up right now in the 49ers, host the Green Bay Packers on Sunday night. And I told you this before we went on air. Insane stat. The NFC North teams, the three at the top of the division, so not the Bears, the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions, Tim, are combined 28-3 against teams not named the Packers, Vikings, and Lions. And guess what? The Seattle Seahawks play the Packers and then the Vikings the next 2 weeks. So if this NFC North dominance continues against everybody else, there might be a window for other NFC West teams to come back. But the 49ers have to take advantage of that window and win a bunch of games.
Yeah, that's why the percentages are low, but it's why the 49ers still have a possibility. They've got to win Thursday, and they need the Seahawks to lose. Those two things must happen for the 49ers to have any chance at this. Shot at both things happening, though. Like, it's not out of the question that both things happen. But if they both things exactly like that do not happen, they're out. And then they go to the next week and they need a similar set of circumstances each of the final weeks. Again, that's why their percentages are so low. But let's see it happen. We know the Seahawks can be up and down. I'll just say, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Detroit. I don't remember them losing to any of the NFC West teams, and that's a division they're playing straight up in the NFC. So they've had a hand in the NFC West not being so great this season because those three teams are so good.
So we got a couple comments, and these are not questions, but they're comments worth reading. One is Brandon Staley has done great work with Renardo Green. That's from Kenny Hamilton. And yeah, I agree. I think the fact that they've got a rookie cornerback in there who's already, sealed a game for them. Renardo Green had that interception in week 6 covering DK Metcalf off of Geno Smith in Seattle. So that's huge for the 49ers because he's obviously a key part of their future secondary. And then the other comment, this is from an anonymous commenter, says it took Saleh and D'Amico a couple seasons to really get it together. Yeah, we alluded to that. With Saleh, they needed the personnel, and they finally got it with the edge rushers in 2019. It didn't take D'Amico a couple seasons. It took D'Amico about half a season,
well,
maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, he had a great defense, so that was part of it. But no, absolutely. I mean, they knew D'Amico is the Sorensen, right? He was promoted within. They knew he was part of the structure. They knew there wasn't going to be like, oh my God, he's got to have to learn how the 49ers do it. And Steve Wilks had to, and it never really happened. That's why the Sorensen situation right now is more like Saleh and D'Amico just because he's come from the system. He's not as dynamic a personality as those guys. That's clear. He's probably not a guy who can push back against Shanahan like those guys could because they had they just had it. They had something to them. And I think the staff is better when Shanahan has more people who can push back. He's going to win every argument. His way goes, but he does not mind being pushed back. And oftentimes it's better when he does get pushed back and things can be adjusted. I don't know who that guy is. And Mike McDaniel was one of those guys who could do it. Maybe, there's Brian, Chris Forster, the offensive line run game guy can, because he's got such a history with him. But I don't know any of those defensive coaches that can push back. Just get an energy, a spark. Saleh used to all the time. And I think it helped that kind of the chemistry. I don't know, just the way things were discussed. Don't know that there's anybody in there. And we certainly, Sorensen does not have that personality. So that's one thing I think might be missing in there. Not that it's the only thing you need, but I think it's part of maybe a little bit lack of the spark in this coaching situation. And look good on Sunday. I'll always have to say that.
But I do have to say, we're talking about defense specifically, but especially leading up into this past Sunday's game, and I don't think one game changes this. I did get the sense that the offensive staff could use that because the brain drain on that side, right? You've lost Mike McDaniel. Clint Kubiak is now the offensive coordinator of the Saints. I think he's somebody with OC experience who there was probably more creative tension in the building last year. Anthony Lynn also.
Bobby Slowick, 2 years ago.
Yeah, Slowick is a coordinator. I mean, this is the cost of success, and we talk about it every offseason. 49ers seem to have guys hired by other staffs around the league for promotions, but you do have to find a way to replenish. And again, it was really unusual because after the Buffalo game, I really started taking a look around the rest of the league to see how the tree is doing. And the only coach that was performing at similar levels to years prior was Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. The other, from Slowick to McVay to Mike McDaniel to Shanahan, the tree was not performing. They have play caller metrics that measured separation and all these things. All those were worse for the entire coaching tree, and just offensive results in general were down. And I think the league, Tim, is a gigantic chess match. It's an ongoing, perpetual chess match. Move, counter move. Whenever stuff works, and let's be honest, Shanahan and McVay, a lot of what they've done has run the league over the past 5 years. Like it's proliferated across the NFL. So defensive coordinators are going to find ways to stop it. And the best example I could find is that Shanahan was really dissuaded for whatever reason for the first several weeks of this year to call screen passes. They were dead last in the NFL in screen passes after being number 6 last year. And their yak was down at the bottom. What have they gone back to finally over the past 2 weeks? Screen passes, and they've gone back to the yak. So that's part of the chess match. It's part of the counter move, the evolution. And I think maybe Shanahan has finally identified, okay, this is how I can make that counter punch. This is how I can get that short passing game back. And that's, I think, why December is going to be really compelling, regardless of whether or not Mike fell, regardless of whether or not the 49ers make the playoffs, is because we can see how this play calling evolution is going to progress and set the table for 2025.
It's like watching Brock Purdy have the football slip out of his hands there. It's like, oh, he hit the ground. Recover that microphone.
It's not snowing here, though. So
it's interesting that like the one Shanahan disciple who's doing well, at least recently before some losses, is D'Amico Ryans on the defensive side. The Houston Texans, I think, are going to win that division. It's a crappy division. But they've been having some struggles. It just, listen, things rise, things fall, cycles go. You just have to be smart. It isn't that the scheme is the greatest thing of all time. It's the ability to make adjustments to counter other things that make you a smart coach. Bill Walsh ran his system, but then he adjusted to it, and other people came in. Holmgren made some adjustments. Other guys made some adjustments. You have to keep doing this. It has to breathe, right? Things live and breathe and adjust and adapt and evolve. And I think the 49ers kind of didn't this season. And I have my own theories. I've said it before. I think the kind of reliance on McCaffrey kind of screwed Kyle up, because when you got that guy, you can just kind of do the thing you do with him and you're not going to get beat. Then you take him out for 8 games. They didn't really make an adjustment. And then they put him in for 2 more games, and he wasn't the same guy for those first 2 games. Started being that guy in the Buffalo game, and then he got hurt. So I just think they kind of took out a bunch of stuff that would work for other people because it wasn't the McCaffrey thing. I think they had to make this adjustment quicker, but again, there are reasons why they did what they did. Defense is doing different things. It just was an interesting kind of way to look at Kyle's offense. I think Sunday was the first time you really thought, man, Kyle's got a rhythm. Like it's easy to say the play works, he's in rhythm, right? And he could be in rhythm and the play just doesn't work because one thing doesn't work out on a play. But it did feel like he was calling one play to set up another, to set up another, to set up another down in the third quarter. Hadn't really felt that this season. And, hey, you put up 319 in the first half. A lot of things are going right. A lot of plays are going right. And, let's you and I both say it. Brock Purdy played terrifically. We are in alignment on him that if this is a down season for Brock Purdy, and I think it is, obviously given from the seasons we've seen from him in the past, it's a remarkable, floor for a 24-year-old quarterback going to turn 25 in a little bit. If this is the worst you're going to get out of him, knowing quarterbacks do improve, knowing that he's not much older than like Jaden Daniels. He's like 3 months older than Jaden Daniels, a rookie. Knowing that, I'm sorry, older than Bo Nix. He's just a little bit more older than Jaden Daniels. This guy is only going to grow. This guy could be looked at as like a rookie quarterback in terms of age. This is something that the 49ers can bank on. And I will write about this, not this week. I'm pushed it back, but this is what you want out of a quarterback when you're deciding whether you're going to pay him huge money. Would you want him to be 6'4" and have a cannon arm and all those other things? Sure. But they got the guy they got, and he runs the Shanahan system exactly the way Kyle wants him to. And he's only going to get better. And if this is the worst, without McCaffrey for 8 games, without Ayuk for most of the season, with Deebo absolutely hitting a wall, with Ricky Pearsall obviously getting shot right before the start of the season and then having to work him in slowly, with all those things, if this is it, can you imagine when the things are put together nicely? And we saw a bit of that on Sunday.
And we
So
saw last year too,
yeah,
and that was before.
absolutely.
I think Purdy's made some strides physically. I think it seems to me he's stronger physically than he was in 2023. We talked about that during training camp, and then we've seen more of the scrambling by necessity this year. But you're exactly right. I mean, he's number 6 QBR now, Tim. So, and that's a stat that does its best to try to isolate QB play from the rest of the team, which is impossible, as we know. It's a team sport, but you just listed all the things that have gone wrong for the 49ers. And when almost everything went right in 2023, he ranked number 1 in QBR, and now he ranks number 6. It's not like he's fallen to number 23. That would be an issue, right? If
Yep.
okay, his demonstrated performance ceiling when everything's going right, top quarterback in the league, most efficient quarterback in the league. Demonstrated floor, oh no, he's in the bottom 10 all of a sudden. Then you start to have this conversation of, oh, what do we do when he's eligible for a new contract? But the fact that he's kept it in that top 6, I think, is immensely impressive, because it really is a long list of things that just haven't broken in the 49ers' favor. And, you mentioned Deebo Samuel. That's one of the questions here. The frustration there has boiled over to social media. I don't know if you saw.
No.
Yesterday, Deebo Samuel tweeted that the reason that he's not struggling, he's just not getting the ball. The
Hmm.
only problem with that is that he has the second most touches on the team, 72. And he actually got community noted on Twitter yesterday.
Jesus.
So,
Yeah.
and John Lynch came on KMBR this morning, and I thought that it was. I think Lynch is great at kind of clearing the air in these situations, and he had let me find the quote from John Lynch today. He's a good executive, right? He's a good CEO
Yes,
type,
he
and
puts the fires out. He does
yes,
know how to put the
and
fires out.
this was definitely a situation that was potentially very flammable. And John Lynch said, and I'll read the quote: Deebo's a really good football player. He's created such a high standard for himself that I think frustration mounts. But he's made so many plays for us. I think we've got to give this guy some grace and bring him along, because we need him the rest of the way. We're going to need him Thursday night. Deebo's a big part of this team, and we're all right. We can all learn from situations and a lot of different things in the world these days that you can get caught up in. But I think Deebo's in a good place from the way he's been working, and we got a lot of football to be played, and he'll be a big part of our season moving forward. I mean, Lynch is so good. I feel finding the
Yeah.
right words in these
Yeah.
situations, but it's obvious that Deebo Samuel's struggling. The 2.9 yards per carry. So for whatever reason, he's not getting what he needs to do. What he's gotten in the past on the ground. The lowest success rate in the pass game for him in his entire career. The one thing that's interesting is that he's exploded on 3 kickoff returns over the past few weeks. So there still is very obviously physically something there. But what I kind of noticed him is that whenever he runs into a defender, in the past, he had generally just blasted defenders
Yeah.
backwards. He's moving backwards now. I don't know if he's lighter this year, because that's something he was talking about entering the season. Maybe he's lost that critical amount of strength that's needed, but obviously it's not fully there in the way that it was before for Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I've kind of said this before, but I'll say it here. It really hit me. I was watching Ashton Genty for Boise State the last few weeks. He reminds me of a young Deebo. He goes through guys. He bounces and he gets another 15 yards or another 50 yards. That's the way Deebo is. I always say Deebo, nobody corners like Deebo. He gets around the edge and then he keeps going. You bump him, you hit him, he keeps going until he's all the way through the edge. And when you watch somebody who reminds me of what Deebo used to do, you're even more struck by what he's not doing now, because he doesn't. He had a couple times when he was at the corner and he stopped. You're right, like you said, he stopped. I don't know that he's lighter. I think it might be the opposite direction, where the feet aren't as fast. He still could get probably to the top speed eventually, or he can still make a move. That's the kickoff thing. One cut and go, but that kind of 2 steps, chop it, and then plant your foot and go through somebody. We have not seen it this season. Absolutely have not seen it. I think his long run is 12 yards. That's his long run. This is a guy who was like used to going for 40 multiple times a game at his prime. Maybe he can get back to it. Maybe there's something, he has a little injury, or maybe just the way the defenses are playing him. But we have not seen it. And I think, there's going to be some repercussions. They can get out of that contract. It's going to hurt them a little bit in dead money, but they built this contract to possibly get out of it next season. I think it's much more likely that they would maybe do the Armstead or Juszczyk. And we saw two different approaches to that. Yeah, you see if they'll take a pay cut. And Armstead did not want to take a pay cut. He was cut and he left. I don't know what Deebo would do. I don't know what his market is right now, though, David. Like, he becomes a free agent. What's he going to sign for? 12 million, 14 million? You're not signing for 30. That is not happening.
Yeah. A lot of it
So
depends on what he puts on tape over the last 4 games.
exactly. So I can see the way I can see this is like the 49ers saying, okay, that wasn't a great season. We'll bring you back. Won't be dead money for us. We'll extend you another year, but your salary is going to have to be lower. And he either takes it or he doesn't take it. But right now, the numbers are terrible. Absolutely terrible. I don't know that they have somebody who can replace him, though. That we don't know. Ricky Pearsall has been invisible the last few weeks. I know there's questions about him. Um, he's got a ways to go. I think that's the number one thing. He's not somebody that Brock Purdy looks for. We're seeing it. It's Jawan Jennings and it's George Kittle. I was kind of surprised Purdy even kind of said that. When you're moving around, you're looking for JJ and you're looking for George. Da, 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 da. He did not say, out of even politeness, Deebo, Pearsall, Cowing, Conley. He didn't say that. He said JJ or George. Clearly, logically, makes sense. Those are his best two receivers. It's interesting that he didn't just throw in a couple other guys, but he's not looking for him. He's looking for those two guys because those two guys are making the plays.
Well, it's interesting. I think we got a perfect storm happening here. Yeah, I think you might be onto something with the foot quickness. Also, what we talked about with Shanahan and the evolution of the 49ers offense up until this point, really, the yak hadn't been there. The quick release, the short game hadn't been there. So I think the defenses have been playing the 49ers offense in a way that has effectively neutralized Deebo Samuel, because he's never been a great separator. He's never been a typical X receiver that's going to go out there and beat man coverage. He's always been Deebo. He's uniquely talented. He's set records over his first few years in the NFL in yards after the catch. He's been a catch and go kind of guy. So especially back when they were running with Jimmy Garoppolo, but also early in the Purdy era when it was get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, that was right in Deebo Samuel's wheelhouse, right? We've seen Brock Purdy hold on to the ball on average 3.1 seconds from snap to release this year. We've seen the air yardage average go way up because they're working downfield more. Like I said, the screen game disappeared up until the past couple weeks. All of that tends to, put Deebo Samuel over into a little corner where he's not, that's his game has essentially not been featured by what the 49ers are doing. And then in the chances that he has gotten, either defenses have been ready for it or he's a little bit slower. The feet aren't moving as fast, whatever it is, or like I said, a perfect storm combination of all those things. So it could just be, simplest take here that Brandon Ayuk, and I know he's hurt this year, but guys like Ayuk, guys like Jawan Jennings, those are receivers that fit Brock Purdy and the 49ers style moving forward really well. And Deebo Samuel's style was the perfect fit for the 49ers for a few years there, but it no longer is, right? Just because of how this offense is evolving and how the league is evolving and forcing the 49ers into different schematic paths.
We've seen it last season with Ayuk was just a more natural fit with Purdy. He just was. Now we'll see how he is after the injury, but this has been tilting a little while. And, people think of Purdy as this, not strong arm, little quarterback throwing dump offs. He's throwing the ball downfield. That guy throws the ball downfield. He's averaging the most yards per attempt in the league again. It's down from last season when he was like 9.6. He's 8.7. Number one, I think he's a little bit ahead of Lamar Jackson. He throws the ball downfield. He wants guys to hit certain areas where he can throw that 15 to 20-yard pass. Deebo is not there. He's done it in the past 4 or 5 years ago. Wasn't great at it. He's really not great at it now. Again, I don't know what his mood is going to be like going to the end of the season, this offseason. I don't know exactly what the 49ers will think about it, but I think he's $26 million next season. I just don't know that they'd want to pay that. Don't know if they want to take the dead cap hit, but maybe they would save them some dollars. And then they see if he's willing to take less money. Might hurt his pride, might want to go. At this moment, given what they're getting from him, not that big of a loss. They'll have to replace him. That's for sure. But Juwan Jennings is better than him. There's not even a doubt about it. I think Juwan Jennings might be ahead of Brandon Ayuk going in next season, given that Ayuk's coming off an injury.
Yeah.
Put up great years, but Juwan Jennings, that's who Purdy's comfortable throwing it to.
Jennings is
You
number
have to
5.
respect.
He's
You
number
have,
5 in yards per route run this
yep.
year.
He's WR1.
Yep. He's
And,
playing the
and
X.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
playing the
And
X.
how can they go? Oh, you know what? Juwan, you're the third receiver now. They can't say that. Cannot say that after what he's done, and clearly feels very comfortable with Purdy. They've basically done it with Jennings and Kittle this season. Those are the receivers. That's it. Hasn't been the running backs. Hasn't been the other receivers. It's been those two guys. And as you mentioned, like their DVR, whatever, DVOA, there's what it was. DVR. It's not the DVR. That's how I watch it, basketball games.
Well,
Is
DVR.
top
Man,
10. They're top 10 offense, even through the struggles, even without having the running game that we're used to seeing from them. They're top 10 offense. It's been Kittle, it's been Juwan Jennings, and it's been make do with a running game. Well, that's obviously a lot of Brock Purdy too.
You know who's the third highest graded guard in all of football? Dominic Puni.
Yeah, he's been so
So
important to them.
he's
So
been,
important.
yeah, so good. It looked like they had found something in Ben Barch. Unfortunately, on the 10th play of the game, he suffered a high ankle sprain. But luckily for them, Aaron Banks is out of concussion protocol now, so he'll be back in at left guard. But Puni has just gotten better. He had that one rough patch in Green Bay with the 3
False start.
penalties,
Yeah.
and every rookie is going to have at least one of those games. So the hope for them is that this offense is really rounding into form. I get it. We've only seen one game recently of Seattle was really good in week 6, but that wasn't the same defense as this Bears defense had some players, and they just had their way with them. I mean, it was impressive, and they executed in the red zone, which is something that's eluded this team. Now we get to see if they do it against the Rams and then the Dolphins and the Lions, who are obviously banged up. So anything could really happen in this league. That's why you just have to keep on fighting until the percentage literally says 0, until you
I
are
continue. You mentioned Barch. I continue to be impressed by Jalen Moore.
Oh yeah. I should
I
not have failed to
I've
mention
really
him.
been surprised. I thought that was going to get leaky there. We know they count on Trent Williams. They know what they get out of him. All pro, going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's been out, and I've not seen any problem out of left tackle, which makes me, and I'm not the only one, wonder, could Jalen Moore be next year's right tackle? And you move McKivitz to right guard. Maybe you don't have to take a tackle with that first round pick. And could that
move Puni over to left guard?
Tiny Puni over left guard, which I think is his natural position also. So you're actually helping 3 positions if you do that.
Somebody asked about center and Brendel, and I think center's always been a position that Kyle Shanahan has coveted. That's why we saw him sign Weston Richburg and Alex Mack. I think that's an extremely important position. I think Brendel's play has declined. I think the knee tendonitis that he dealt with has something to do with it. If they can get their hands on a good center that fits what Shanahan wants to do, I think they absolutely try to go for that this offseason. They're just hard to come by because Shanahan has such a specific demand of centers, right? Like it's a very high value position because he's taken on a lot of the responsibilities that in other systems quarterbacks have.
Yep.
So the center has to be able to call
They call it protections.
Yes.
Pretty important thing in a Shanahan offense. And he doesn't want the big, thick guy. You got to move too. You got to be athletic. And tends not to be a rookie. He ain't drafting a rookie to play center for the San Francisco 49ers. He is usually trying to plug in a veteran that he knows can run his system and fit with the scheme that they run. It'll be interesting. That is a position that if they just get somebody solid, man, if they had a Creed Humphrey, David, at center, like the Chiefs just drafted him and plopped him right in there, and he's an all-pro, that would make this offense feel different. It definitely would. But I'm just saying, Jalen Moore to right tackle, McKivitz to right guard, Puni to left guard. That's a big, like one move. All of a sudden, you've got much more interesting physically, I think, too. And without having to pay Aaron Banks, which I don't think they're going to in free agency. These are, I think, the things that they got to be thinking about and probably are thinking about right now.
Yeah. And I think the Puni pick was so massive for this team. They've already improved in the aggregate pass blocking rankings just because of that, because they were bottom barrel on the right side last year. And Puni has put them near the top at right guard. Plus, I think it's helped McKivitz out at right tackle. But you've got to continue pushing forward. I always point to Kansas City when they just got destroyed by Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl the year after they beat the 49ers. That was Super Bowl 55. And I know they had a lot of injuries, the Chiefs did, but that really caused them to look in the mirror and say, we've got a great quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, but he put up 9 points. That offense put up 9 points in the Super Bowl without decent protection and a good line. And the Chiefs, since then, you talk about Creed Humphrey. I mean, he's been one of the players they've added since then in this massive reinvestment in the front. And we saw the 49ers invest a little bit with Dominic Pooney, but I would expect them to try to figure out ways to make the line take another step this next year. I think that's going to be really important. That answers one of the questions there. We got a guy that came over from YouTube and just signed up for the Standard.
There you
Papa
go.
J is his name. So he just commented. He said he just signed up, and he is now asking a question about Deebo Samuel. We might have already answered it in our talk. He said, any truth to there's a talented wide receiving group that's coming up in this draft? Maybe the 49ers could find the Deebo replacement there. I think it's turned into every year there's a talented wide receiver room because college football is so pass oriented these days. I have not specifically studied the prospects yet, so I'm not going to speak on that specifically. But I think in general, Tim, the goal is to always be replenishing through the draft. The 49ers did it or tried to do it with Ricky Pearsall last year, and I wouldn't rule it out moving forward again because
we know they take defensive linemen and wide receivers in the first
yep,
round,
there you
almost every
go.
one or the other, and they could do it again. I would, probably they wouldn't want to draft a receiver back-to-back years in the first round, but they could. Don't From what I've seen, it's not as loaded as it's been in the past. LSU doesn't have all those. Usually it's in the big year. It's LSU loads up. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. That's who was the other one who's been very good for Jacksonville. Don't think it's that level. It's not that deep. There's not like 5 guys you could go in the top 15. The guy out of Arizona, I think McMillan's his name. The guy out of Missouri, Luther Burden. There's a few, but I don't think any of them were thought to be that Malik Neighbors, that Justin Jefferson level. It just we'll see. But if they end up at 15, 16, that could be where you get a receiver. I tend to still think line of scrimmage. I'm thinking line of scrimmage for them. Thinking defensive lineman, maybe defensive tackle, because there's some good defensive tackles, or offensive tackle if there's a great one there for them. Maybe not at 15. I was thinking more of that if they're like creeping towards 11, 10, 9. That's where you tend to get your great tackles. So probably defensive line again, David, just knowing who they are. They will always be, interested in an elite level player at any position. But I'm thinking defensive line, maybe defensive tackle, just by where this draft kind of spreads out. But we'll see. They could move up. That's one thing. If you get a 14, we saw them move up when they had 12 a few years ago, David. It didn't quite work out for them.
12-3.
But they could. You're just in better position. You're in better position to move up and go get somebody you love at 8. If you just love the number 1 receiver and he's there at 8, you can get there from 15. It's hard to get there from 28, from 31. But we'll see. I just don't think, from what I've seen from college football, from what I see from the draft, kind of looks right now, doesn't look like this is going to be like one of those years where it's 3 in the top 15. I don't think that's what it's going to be. And it's going to need to be that for the 49ers because they're going to be at 15 or 14. They're not going to get their first choice of receiver. It's going to be second or third. And I don't see like a Brian Thomas Jr. being available at 18, like he was, I think last year was like 22 or something like that. We'll see, but I don't know that that's going to be there. And they've got Pearsall already. Maybe, he can develop into that guy next year where he's just a jump off the page young receiver. Did not happen or hasn't happened so far this season.
Well, you're talking about the other position or one of the many other positions that you could fortify, the defensive line. They made a move, or the move came to light today. Javon Hargrave and the 49ers agreed to a pay cut in 2000.
Interesting. I did not hear that.
Yeah, which basically they took the base salary, which was $19.9 million, and slashed it to the base $2.1 million. None of it was guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So that sets them up to potentially cut him post June 1 and gain a little bit of 2025 cap space, or they could still renegotiate something this offseason. It gives them flexibility. The out in Javon Hargrave's contract was next year. The guaranteed money was all in 2023 and 2024. So basically, they free up a good $17.8 million of cap space for the time being, and then he's still recovering from a torn triceps muscle. They seemed optimistic early in the season when the outlook was rosier for the team that he could be back around the playoffs. That talk is on ice for the moment because they're not likely to make the playoffs. But I think if they do find a way to sneak into the playoffs, we're going to start talking about Javon Hargrave and can he be back and all this and all that, and then we can start talking about the contract and if the 49ers do release him this offseason or if they give it one more go with Javon Hargrave at a lower price and maybe it's not 2.1 million where it currently is as a placeholder right now. Maybe they negotiate something like the Armstead pay cut that never was agreed to, but maybe they try to offer something in that range and we see him back, or they go to the draft and they try to replenish the defensive line that way. So there are going to be a few of these types of decisions. We talked about Deebo Samuel, year left on his deal. Hargrave technically has 2025 and 2026. And this is how it's going to work for the 49ers in the offseason. They've got to make sure that that roster needs to be as financially efficient as possible so they could absorb the massive deal that's coming, and that's the one for Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I can see them doing it to use check again. I could see them, maybe extending Kittle, but lowering his number. Incredible year. I'm not saying you do it because you don't think he's got value. You know he's got value, but it's another year, and maybe you guarantee some more money, but you extend it out so his cap hit is less. There's some veterans that you'd have to look at. Hargrave would have been number one to me. I mean, absolutely. Travarius Ward will probably, this is probably his last year with the 49ers. They have other cornerbacks. You can just kind of look around and just see some players who are like, okay, this is a contract that they're going to want to change a little bit. And they've already done it. The track record's there, even back to 2020, right, with DeForest Buckner. Like, this is just kind of how they roll, and they've got the quarterback contract coming. And, it's a lot of things go into that contract, a lot of ways you could do it, but we know it's going to be a lot of guaranteed money. And that is something that they're going to have to budget for, plan for, figure out. It's going to be over $150 million guaranteed. I see very little way they're going to get less than 150. And that means it's going to take possibly from other areas, other positions, other players.
Anonymous commenter says he wants Tyler Warren from Penn State, who reminds me a lot of George Kittle, just a super athletic H-back tight end type of player. I watched him
play. Incredible. He's incredible.
Yeah.
He's incredible.
He made that corner route they ran, and he went up. It looked like a 40-inch vertical making that catch.
He looks like Gronk. Maybe not the same kind of player, but the athlete, blocker, but the athlete. Like, yes. Kittle's a great athlete, but Gronk is next level. Gronk was all-time athlete at tight end. Warren just looks like he runs the friggin' short yardage quarterback. He's their short yardage quarterback. Like, this guy is a leaper. He's just an amazing talent. Maybe like a Kellen Winslow or something. Like, this is just a once in a lifetime athlete. At tight end. It would be amazing for the 49ers, something that Shanahan's kind of look for, as not spent a lot of money because you've got so much with Kittle. But geez, you talk about a luxury item that would really could change some things for the 49ers offense. I think two things. Ashton Jeanty, I know Shanahan's never take running backs in the first round, but Ashton Jeanty is a special running back. And he would be basically your McCaffrey replacement for whenever you need to, and you can have him as a bonus talent for a year or two. And Warren would be my other kind of luxury item. Like, you don't necessarily need him, but how do you jumpstart your offense? How do you change the dynamics of your offense? Those two guys. I don't think they're going to do it. They value defensive line too much, and you understand why they do. And they do have needs on the defensive line, but those two guys sitting where they're sitting might be the spot to do it, is the interesting thing. They're in that kind of luxury item slot if they want to, because other teams are going to take all the tackles, all the top receivers, all the top tackles. Then they might be sitting there going, okay, well, these guys who are not the premium positions are sitting there. We get the choice of it. What do they do? We'll see. We got a long way
Well,
to go before there, David. Many columns to go, but we're
yes,
starting
a
the
lot of
conversation.
team building.
Yeah,
It's so exciting for me. I love writing about team
I
building.
do.
And
Yes, I do.
I think the 49ers are getting a little head start on it now with the Hargrave move today. And that's not a complicated move. People acting like it's something crazy. They're literally just taking non-guaranteed money and slashing it off the contract. But still, they're setting the table to arrange some deck chairs this offseason. I think that you talk about Kittle, we talk about team building. The cost efficiency of George Kittle is twofold. One, they didn't have to spend a pick for him until the fifth round, and he delivered two 1,000-yard receiving seasons immediately, an 18 and 19 for the 49ers for a fifth round pick. That's value whichever way you look at it. And that's before we even talk about the blocking. But even after they've paid him, they paid him on the tight end scale. So what was it, 15 million a year? So
Yep.
he's at 800 receiving yards, Tim. That means he's almost certainly, if he stays healthy, he's going to eclipse 1,000 again. He was 1,000 last year. So he's going to give the 49ers multiple 1,000-yard receiving seasons at 15 million APY, which if you're paying receiver money for these guys, that's you're not going to get it for 15 million APY for a guy that's going over 1,000 consistently. So that's the way that you can fit a lot of these deals and productivity into a crowded cap situation, is you find the positional monetary advantages. And one of the biggest advantage in the league has been George Kittle, because he's underpaid due to the tight end market, but he's producing 1,000-yard seasons receiving wise for you, right?
And
So,
eight touchdowns this season. I think it
yep.
was similar number last season. Purdy really likes throwing him to him in the red zone. Jimmy didn't so much. It was interesting. It's been Brock who's really found him in the end zone a lot. And yet, no question, he's. And by the way, it's no, when they have leaders speak, Shanahan picks two younger guys, Lenore and Purdy, and who else? George Kittle. Like that, we talk about being a good locker room. We talk about being a steady locker room, even in times of trouble, where there aren't finger pointing, there aren't people throwing up their arms and yelling at each other. Other than on the sideline when Jake Moody misses a field goal, but that's a whole other thing. Um, George Kittle is a big part of that, and Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and Trent Williams. Like those are the guys who steady that locker room. There are other leaders. Those are the guys when it's like when the messages have to be sent, those are the guys who send it. And when you play hard, you have to play hard because of your teammates. You're playing for them. You're playing for Kittle. You're playing for Warner. You're playing for Trent. You're playing for those guys in there. And so you don't give that up. You pay for that kind of thing because that's what leads a team through some troubled times and maybe to a better 2025.
Well, speaking of leadership, on Thursday, there's a chance that Dre Greenlaw's back out on the field. I know we started the show with that. We could kind of wrap it up with a Rams preview while answering a couple more of these questions. I think, well, here's one about Kittle really quickly. Will Kittle want an extension? I, yeah, I think any player at this Kittle, as far as I can tell, I talk to him every week. I try. That's one of the first guys I go up to in the locker room just to get a pulse on how the game went right after. I think he really likes it with the 49ers. I wouldn't be surprised if they extended him this offseason before they get to the lame duck year on the contract. So that I think that'd be a savvy move, because again, you're going to be paying him on the tight end scale, and he's producing like a top wide receiver in the league. Plus, he gives you a lot more than just the receiving. I think I tweeted that a couple weeks ago. I said, 49ers aren't playing well, but one guy that really is George Kittle. And if the 49ers want to be economically prudent here, like financially savvy, you get ahead of the Kittle extension, because he's been value for his whole career. He's still only 31 years old. You see how Kelsey has produced at a much more advanced age. I think George Kittle still has a lot of good football left in him. So that's something I wouldn't be surprised that the 49ers moved on this
Yeah,
offseason.
I'll just say tight ends over 30 tend not to get extended very much. Kelsey's a once in a lifetime generational, and Kittle is in many ways too. It's just
Yeah.
that's not the guy you go, we're desperate. Oh my God, if he hits the market, we're never going to get him back. It's just not, that's not the position that does it into the 30s. I'll just say, I can't name another one other than Kelsey who's been worth it. Gronk was like retired at 32. So like, I would say, On that one, maybe they extend him to lower the cap hit. Like that's what they do. You
Yeah,
extend
yeah,
him
push it
so that
back
you
a few
lower the
years.
cap hit because you believe in him. You don't do it. Oh my God, we're going to put you at the top of the market. I don't know that that's going to happen for a 31-year-old tight end. Um, it, just look at the positions where they've been really, really kind of aggressive on defensive line because those guys get hurt, and once they get hurt, they got to clear them out. And tight end is one of those where you get hit every single play. And so I'll just say they might extend him just to get it, just kind of confirm that he's on the team for a while, confirm what the number is. But it's not going to be like, hey, look, we got to get you to the top of the tight end market. I don't think that's going to happen.
One thing though is that look how much they've struggled whenever he's been out. The
Yeah,
Seattle game is a great example. That they just have not been able to find the
that's
Robin to his Batman, right?
yeah.
Like and so it's just been a huge problem for the 49ers whenever Kittle's been out. We could talk about McCaffrey dependency, which you addressed a little bit earlier. There definitely is to some extent Kittle dependency in the offense because they've been so used to this guy being in that spot where he is a run blocking threat while simultaneously being a receiving threat. And I think that opens so much up for Kyle Shanahan because defenses don't know what the 49ers are going to run on any given play where Kittle is in there. So I guess that's why the Tyler Warren name comes up is because the 49ers have been looking for so long to find that second tight end, somebody that could truly complement what Kittle brings to the fold for obvious reasons, and B, what's life after George Kittle going to look like whenever that does come? Because they didn't have Kittle in that game against Seattle, and I would put a lot of money on if don't worry, I'm not betting, but I'd wager a lot to say that they would have beaten Seattle had Kittle been available in that game a couple weeks ago. I think that really screwed up the offense. So
And it was hurt towards the end of the Super Bowl. Like if he's
yep,
healthy at the end of the fourth quarter, going in overtime, maybe they score a touchdown in overtime. And you can say a lot of things. He's a great player. I'm just saying, 31-year-old tight ends don't tend to reset the market.
yep.
It's just the way that it's going to be a 26-year-old tight end who resets the market. I don't know who that is. It would help them a lot to get another tight end that one they could kind of groom to be his successor, and two take some of this heat off of him where you don't have to play him 95% of the snaps. Eric Saubert ain't it. They've been through. I don't think Cam Latu is it. They've tried, and it has not happened yet. But incredibly valuable player. I do think Shanahan would love to have a counter option at tight end. They just haven't been able to. Part of it's just George is so good, and you play him. You play the guy who changes your offense. No question about that.
One more question here. We got 2-3 minutes. Steve Cass asks, is Ricky Pearsall getting open or is he being tightly covered? Problem watching on TV, I can't tell. The most prominent play, he was open, but there was a miscommunication between him and Purdy. It was the deep pass on that drive that went nowhere early in the second half. And Pearsall kind of sat down, broke in, and Purdy threw it as if he were going to continue running toward the end zone. So, and Purdy actually blamed it on himself. I don't know if that was Purdy just trying to shield the
He always
rookie.
does. He always
Pearsall,
does.
yeah.
He
But
always
but
does.
the main point is that Pearsall was open, but he just wasn't communicating properly there with Purdy on the play. He was getting open in about a month ago against
Mhm.
Dallas. He had that great out pattern where Purdy found him, the anticipatory throw. He had a big game against Tampa, long touchdown, and then Purdy went to him on the game-winning drive, and then he just disappeared. John Lynch said on KMBR last week that he was banged up, and we didn't know about that until Lynch said that. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But he only has one catch over the past 4 weeks. What have you been seeing from Ricky?
What I've been seeing is he tends to get, like, when you see him come open, it's after Purdy's thrown it, whatever that means. Like it's just like he's breaking open after the time that Purdy has to decide to throw. So that is not open actually because he's had to throw it by then.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some kind of like release issues with him. Now, what do we see in training camp? The guy was running really tight routes. Like he was getting open exactly when and where he should get open. That's the Shanahan milestone. Like there are spots where you need to be at certain times for the quarterback to feel you. And Pearsall was good at that in training camp. I think it's gotten a little wobbly there, at least I think in Purdy's mind, because I don't even see Purdy looking for him. Like not even like check. Okay, I got to go somewhere else. I think there's not a confidence that he's going to be open right when Purdy needs to release the ball. He does have that confidence in Kittle and Jennings, obviously, or he'll wait a beat for them to get open. He's not waiting that beat for Pearsall, and I think some of that is just trust in practice that you can bring to games. But he's a young receiver. Like, this is not like Ayuk was struggled as a rookie, as we know. I mean, he played because he had to play, but he wasn't a guy that Jimmy Garoppolo said, I'm actually throwing at this guy. I think there's some of that. Like, it's like, where are you going exactly? If you can't go exactly where I'm going to throw it, then I'm not going to keep looking at you. And if he would keep looking at him, I think he does have the talent to get open. I just don't think he's getting open when Brock Purdy expects him to, and when where he expects him to. And Jennings and Kittle and Ayuk last season were guys he absolutely could trust. Again, I think it's interesting that he said, throwing the ball to let JJ and George make plays. Stop. Nobody else mentioned. I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, this could wrap it up right here. This is a good thought from an anonymous commenter. He said, getting Pearsall involved in the screen game would play into his strengths. He's quick and shifty. I agree. And the screen game has definitely grown over the past couple of weeks for the 49ers. 7 against Buffalo, a few more successful ones against this past week in the win against the Bears. And maybe that's a good way to really start to integrate Ricky Pearsall into the offense. But we shall see. Everybody, this is the hour. It's up. But make sure, especially if you're not watching through the San Francisco Standard, if you're watching on one of the other social media channels, memberships are open. A lot of cool perks with memberships. So just go sfstandard.com/memberships to check it out and sign up. It's the best way to support our 49ers coverage. And Tim has also been putting up some really good stuff on both the Warriors and the Giants, who the Giants are busy making some
interesting
moves now.
stuff. And I'll say, I don't want to speak for David. You might, if you become a member of the Standard, you might have like a meet and greet panel discussion with me and David. I think we would love to have that. We'd love to see some of you guys there in the off season, not during the regular season, but things like that are part of this membership, and we're really eager to make it as valuable as possible.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So sfstandard.com/memberships, and hope to see you there. All right, Tim, thanks. We will see you down this week in Santa Clara. Quick turnaround.
See you Thursday.
Take care.